Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land today. Glad to have you with me in the chat room. Glad to have the lurkers out there. All my people on Memorex, I'd like to see it later on. Glad to have you with me today. Boy, I'll tell you what, it's been a wild morning. I have been running like a wild, crazy woman for the last 5 hours. And YouTube isn't helping matters any. They've been a little wacky this morning. I had some technical difficulties, but hey, we're up and running now, and that's what counts. Last day of Mercury retrograde here on the 21st day of September 2016. We got the news to do for you now, and then we'll be back in 2 hours with interview with Barry Littleton. Hope everybody will join me. That'll be a live broadcast, and he loves questions from the chat room, so hope everybody brings their questions. And if you're kind of new to Barry and you don't know about him, he is an alien experiencer, and he has a YouTube channel. You can look at some of his videos there on YouTube, and he also has a Facebook page where you can check out a lot of very interesting things that he puts up, and he's very well read, very educated in this field. So I think you'll all enjoy the interview with him. This is the second one that I've done with Barry, so hope everybody will join in for that one and spread it far and wide. Of news to bring you today, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right on into it. The first one we have here is off the Daily News, and this site is a little wonky. They have some so you have to bear with me through this one while I try to fight off the ads. It says North Carolina police fatally shoots 43-year-old Keith Scott. Relatives dispute cops claim he was armed. 12 officers injured during a violent clash with protesters. And this reads, police fatally shot North Carolina man they claim was armed, but a woman who said she was his daughter cried out on Facebook Live that he didn't have a gun, triggering riotous protests that stretched into the pre-dawn hours and left at least 12 officers injured. Charlotte Mecklenburg police said Keith Lamont Scott, age 43, posed an imminent to the officers while cops were trying to serve a warrant on a different man in an apartment complex around 4 p.m. on Tuesday. A Facebook user identifying herself as Lyric Scott, the fallen man's daughter, streamed an hour-long broadcast that appeared to be coming from the scene in Charlotte. She rejected the police's account that her father had been armed. The police just shot my daddy 4 times for being black, she said. They tased him first and then shot him. Investigators, however, said Officer Brentley Vinson shot Scott after he emerged with a gun for a second time from a car parked at the complex in University City area. Police said officers had spotted Scott getting out of the car wielding a firearm before returning to the vehicle. The cops began walking toward Scott when he suddenly got back out, still carrying the firearm. Several officers then fired at him, police said. Police source told the Charlotte Observer that Vinson is black. Scott was pronounced dead at the hospital after an emergency crew brought him there for treatment. Investigators recovered the gun at the scene at the Village at College Downs complex on Old Concord Road, according to police. Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Chief Carrie Putney said Vinson, a 2-year department veteran, has been placed on administrative leave as police investigate the shooting. None of the officers were hurt, Putney noted. This is early on in the investigation, so that's about the extent of what we know right now, Putney said in a news conference. Scott's unidentified sister told WSOC he wasn't messing with nobody when the officers showed up. They jumped out of their truck. They said, hands up. He's got a gun. He's got a gun. Pow, 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 she said. That's it. He didn't have a gun. Hundreds of protesters flooded the area as word of the shooting got out. They chanted Black Lives Matter and hands up, don't shoot, while blocking traffic and throwing bottles at officers. Facebook user live streamed what appeared to be dozens of protesters pelting a police vehicle with rocks. Protesters were also seen getting on top of the vehicle and kicking the front windshield as police helicopters hovered above. We ain't chilling no more, a man shouts at the top of his voice in the video. You think we're going to sit down when they are killing us? Charlotte Mayor Jennifer Roberts pleaded for calm as police in riot gear fired tear gas at protesters around 11 p.m. The community deserves answers and full investigation will ensue, Roberts said in a tweet. But Roberts' plea fell on deaf ears as a group of particularly riotous protesters marched over to a busy highway where they blocked several lanes, looted trucks, and lit a massive fire in the middle of traffic. An unidentified female inside her truck told WSOC TV reporter she feared for her life as she heard protesters break into her trailer. I understand they want to make a statement, but they are hurting innocent people trying to make a living, the woman said. The protesters on the highway hold up and tried to break into a nearby Walmart, but ran off once officers and SWAT teams caught up with them. At least 7 civilians were taken into area hospitals with minor injuries, and roughly 5 protesters had been arrested by 4:30 a.m. Wednesday, WSOC reported. Police said in a tweet that as many as 12 officers sustained non-life-threatening injuries during the clashes, which were still ongoing around 5 a.m. So there you have the information on what transpired in Charlotte last night. The next one we have here is off USA Today. It says protests erupt in Charlotte after police kill a man, 12 officers hurt. And it's pretty much more of the same. It says demonstrators started a fire and shut down part of the Interstate 85 during early Wednesday, and about 12 officers were injured and squad cars damaged when protests erupted after an African American man was shot and killed by another officer. Police began using tear gas and flashbangs to disperse demonstrators who police said had been joined by agitators. Police were guarding a Walmart store early Wednesday after protesters smashed stores' doors, according to the media reports. But Mayor Jennifer Roberts appealed for calm and says, I will continue to work with our manager and chief on officer-involved shooting. We are reaching out to community to ask for calm, she says. The protest erupted Tuesday night over the officer-involved shooting death of Keith Lamont Scott, age 43. Officers were searching for a suspect with an outstanding warrant Tuesday afternoon at the village at College Downs when they observed a person, not the suspect they were looking for, inside a vehicle at the apartment complex, according to Charlotte-Mecklenburg police. The man exited the vehicle armed with a firearm, then got back in. When officers approached the car, the person got out of the car with the gun again. The officers considered the man to be an imminent deadly threat to officers who subsequently fired their weapons, striking the subject, officials said. Emergency responders transported the man to Emergency responders transported the man to Carolina's Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. Agitators destroyed marked police units. ECU continues to work to restore order and protect the community. No officers were injured in that incident. Detectives recovered a firearm and were interviewing witnesses. The officer who fired the fatal shot was Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officer Brentley Vinson. A police statement said both Scott and Vinson are African American. Vinson was placed on administrative leave, which is standard procedure. Vinson has been with the department for 2 years, according to the Associated Press. Racial tensions are high across the country in the wake of other officer-involved shootings. The shooting death of an unarmed black man named Terrence Crutcher on Friday night in Tulsa came under the spotlight Monday as video footage that captured the encounter circulated on social media. As night fell, a crowd about 100 people gathered, chanting in protests. Associated Press reported this to the area, which is about a mile from the campus of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. So there you have that information, and all of these URLs that I talk about today are in the description of the video should you decide you'd like to take a look at them. The next one we have here is off of BizPac Review. Bombing suspect's dad, 2 years. I called the FBI on my son. They said he's not a terrorist. The father of bombing suspect Ahmad Khan Rahami said he reported his son to the FBI 2 years ago for violent behavior. 2 years I called the FBI. My son, he's doing very bad, okay? But they check it almost 2 months. They say he's not a terrorist. I say, okay. Now they say he's a terrorist. I say, okay. Rahami's father, Mohammed, said to reporters outside his home in Elizabeth, New Jersey, according to Fox News. The father recalled that when he had called the FBI 2 years ago, his son was doing bad. Yeah, he stabbed my son, he hit my wife, and I put him in jail 2 years ago. Unquote. According to Fox News, the FBI's Newark field office looked into accusations, a federal law enforcement source told FoxNews.com. Ahmad Khan Rahami was in jail on an assault charge at the time, the source said, but agents interviewed his father. He recanted immediately. He left that part out. He said he didn't mean his son was a terrorist, just that he was interested in gang activity and watching violent videos. There was no derogatory information on him, no bias to continue the investigation, the source said. FBI's scrubbing of the allegations made against Rahami at the time did not turn anything up, or as law enforcement source close to the investigation described the lead, washout. Fox News is told a full-blown investigation into Rahami was not opened. The suspect's father answered reporters' questions as he left his home above the family's fried chicken restaurant and got in his car driving away. His 28-year-old son is suspected of planting bombs in New York City, as well as Elizabeth and Seaside Park, New Jersey, Fox reported. Wounded when one of the devices in New York City exploded Saturday night. So that's what they have to say about that. The next one we have here is off of ZeroHedge.com. Says commuting nightmare looms. New York City at highest alert since 9/11 as UN meetings get underway. A full week of United Nations meetings are getting underway today, which was yesterday, in New York, just as Chief of Department Carlos Gomez confirms we're at a level of alert that this city has never seen since 9/11. Was heightened security around the UN meetings. Mayor Bill de Blasio confirmed this year would be in light of the recent bombings in New York and New Jersey, telling reporters we would normally have an expanded presence for the General Assembly. You will see an even stronger presence now. The New York Police Department is also warning New Yorkers to expect heavy travel delays. Per ABC, the NYPD is organizing a joint task force of local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, including heavy weapons team and canines, that will add thousands of cops to New York streets to conduct enhanced bag checks at subway stations throughout the city and monitor major traffic intersections. Meanwhile, areas around Chelsea are still cordoned off and completely inaccessible to commuters, with residents having to show a utility bill. Per Bloomberg, New York and New Jersey public transit authorities are warning commuters that while most infrastructure is operational, apart from stops around Chelsea, that commuters should plan for delays. Per Bloomberg, delays. Amtrak's Northeast Corridor serves will operate a modified schedule Monday after trains were stopped Sunday evening. New Jersey Transit said it resumed regular service at 5:30 a.m. with delays. PATH trains to operate as normal from 5 a.m. through the 23rd Street station remain closed. Metro North and Long Island Railroad's normal service. The New York subway is also reporting normal service apart from the 23rd Street station remaining closed for the 1, 2, 3, B, D, F, and M trains. All bridges and tunnels into Manhattan are operating with delays. If ever there was a week to just work from home, we think this might be it. You have that article, and the next one we have here is off the New York Times. This is again about the bomber, Ahmad Khan Rahami, charged in New York and New Jersey bombings, it says. Man who the authorities may, try it again, the man who the authorities say set off powerful bombs in Manhattan and on the New Jersey shore over the weekend, planned the attacks for months, conducted a dry run just days before unleashing his assault, and took inspiration from brother Osama bin Laden and other international terrorists, according to a criminal complaint filed in federal courts on Tuesday. The man, Ahmad Khan Rahami, age 28, was charged with several crimes, including use of weapons of mass destruction and bombing a place of public use. And the criminal complaint against him outlines how close the attacks came to causing death and even more destruction. The bomb in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood on Saturday night was powerful enough to vault a heavy steel dumpster more than 120 feet through the air, according to the complaint. Windows shattered 400 feet from where the explosion went off, and pieces of the bomb were recovered 650 feet away. Among the 31 victims, 2 more than first reported. One had to have multiple ball bearings removed from her body, as well as bits of metal from an shards from her neck, the complaint says. The charges came on a day when Mr. Rahami's father told the authorities 2 years ago that he feared his son was a terrorist, prompting a review by the Federal Bureau of Investigation that did not find any basis for a fuller inquiry. The complaint says Mr. Rahami was motivated by an extremist Islamic ideology that he recorded in a notebook he had with him when he was shot and wounded by the police in Linden, New Jersey on Monday morning before being taken into custody. By a bullet and splattered with blood, the journal contains screeds against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In one handwritten message, Mr. Rahami pleads that he not be caught before carrying out his planned attacks. My heart I pray to the beautiful wise Allah, he wrote, to jihad away from I beg. Elsewhere in the notebook, complaint says he refers to the pipe bombs and pressure cookers as well as to shooting police officers. Mr. Rahami writes the kafar, or unbelievers, and praises terrorist figures, including Anwar al-Awlaki, I guess it is, once al-Qaeda's leading propagandist, who died in a drone strike in Yemen, as well as the soldier in the Fort Hood shooting, among the deadliest of the so-called lone wolf attacks inspired by al-Qaeda. Mr. Rahami had been meticulously planning his attacks since at least June, according to the complaint, acquiring the materials he used to construct his weapons, often by eBay, where he was registered as Ahmad Rahami. While items like ammo, slingshot, steelies, and electric igniters used for firework displays might seem harmless, in Mr. Rahami's hands, they were combined to create tools of potential carnage, the complaint says. 2 days before the bombings in Chelsea, according to the complaint, Mr. Rahami recorded video of himself igniting an incendiary device in the backyard of his Elizabeth, New Jersey home. The lighting of a fuse, the complaint says, is followed by billowing smoke and laughter before Mr. Rahami is seen entering the frame and picking up the device. Patton, the chief federal defender in Manhattan, said on Tuesday that his lawyer's immediate goal was for Mr. Rahami, who remains in the hospital, to appear before a judge so that he can be informed of the charges against him. Late on Tuesday, Mr. Patton wrote to the court asking that Mr. Rahami be given court appearance on Wednesday at the earliest possible time. If he cannot travel to Manhattan for medical reasons, Mr. Patton proposed a hearing by phone or video conference. The complaint leaves unanswered questions about when Mr. Rahami began to harbor such apparent antipathy for the country he had lived in for years and where he had become a naturalized citizen. As happened with those involved in terrorism-related cases in Orlando, Florida, San Bernardino, California, and Boston, federal authorities had looked into Mr. Rahami's life well before he launched his assaults. Federal agents first became aware of Mr. Rahami 2 years ago when his father shared with them his concerns that his son might be involved in terrorism. The FBI, which had been notified about Mr. Rahami by the local police after a domestic dispute involving the family, said in a statement that it conducted a review, checking its database, contacting other agencies, and conducting interviews, but the review did not turn up anything that warranted further inquiry, and the matter was closed. Investigators have not discovered any ties between Mr. Rahami and known terrorist groups, and no one has claimed responsibility for the attacks. While the Islamic State is usually quick to claim credit for attacks around the world, organizations linked to Al-Qaeda vary widely in when or if they do so. One key area of investigation involves whether Mr. Rahami had helped building the bombs or if anyone knew what he was doing and did not report it. In all, he is linked to 10 explosive devices found in the region. Among those Mr. Rahami praised in his notebook, according to the complaint, Mr. Awaki, whose lectures and jihadist declarations are widely available on the web. So too is Inspire magazine, which has published detailed instructions for making pipe bombs as well as more sophisticated explosive devices using pressure cookers and Christmas lights, the components used in the New York area bombs. Killed in drone strike ordered by President Obama, Mr. Awaki remains a powerful influence on would-be jihadists, especially in English-speaking West. Among his documented admirers were Saeed Rizwan Farouk, who, along with his wife, killed 14 people in San Bernardino, Omar Mateen, who fatally shot 49 people in an Orlando nightclub, and Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tarznov, who staged an attack at the finish line of the Boston Marathon with pressure cooker bombs in 2013. The authorities are also scrutinizing a number of trips Mr. Rahami made overseas, particularly several to Pakistan on May in May 2011. He made a 3-month trip to Quetta, according to law enforcement officials, citing customs and border protection records. In April of 2013, he traveled to Quetta again and did not return until March of 2014, according to information provided to customs authorities by the New York City Police. Mr. Rahami's wife, Asia, who left the country days before the bombing, is now in the United Arab Emirates. She provided a statement to the FBI, according to officials, and the authorities are working to bring her back into the country as soon as possible. The FBI believes Mr. Rahami acted alone, but is trying to speak with everyone who knew him. It was unclear when Mr. Rahami married his wife, but after returning from a nearly year-long visit to Pakistan in March of 2014, he was increasingly desperate to get her into the country. He was still in Pakistan when he emailed Representative Albio Sires, Democrat of New Jersey, asking for help getting her a visa, the congressman said. Mrs. Rahmani's Pakistani passport had expired, and agents at the United States Embassy in Islamabad discovered that she was 35 weeks pregnant, Mr. Sire said. Ms. Rahami was told she would need to wait until her baby was born before she could apply for United States visas for her and the child. She eventually came to the United States. It was unclear when her visa issue was resolved, but in August of 2014, Mr. Rahami got into a fight with his family during which he stabbed his brother in the leg with a knife, court records show. When the police arrived, Mr. Rahami's father told them of his concerns about his son's possible involvement in terrorism. The information was passed to the Joint Terrorism Task Force led by the FBI in Newark. Officers opened what is known as an assessment, the most basic of FBI investigations, and interviewed multiple times. They never interviewed Mr. Rahami, who was in jail at the time, according to 2 law enforcement officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. The father, Mohammed Rahami, said in an interview that at the time he told FBI agents about his concerns. His son was going through a difficult period. 2 years ago, I go to the FBI because my son was doing really bad, okay, he said. But they check almost 2 months. They say he's okay, he's clean, he's not a terrorist. I say okay. He added, now they say he's a terrorist. I say okay. One official familiar with the inquiry said that the elder Mr. Rahami, after his initial comments about his son, recanted and said he had spoken out of anger. The assessment of Mr. Rahami illustrates the challenges that the FBI faces as it solicits information from the public about people who might pose a threat and then must sort through what is credible while balancing the need to protect the country without overstepping its authority. Depending on the intensity and urgency of an inquiry, there are 3 types of investigations the FBI can undertake with varying levels of intrusive techniques. The first is an assessment, which the agents use basic techniques like conducting interviews, talking to confidential informants, using physical surveillance, and checking databases and public records. Next comes preliminary and full investigations, which can be initiated if agents believe a federal crime has been committed or there is a threat to national security. Those investigations can involve polygraphs, undercover agents, and mail searches. Both assessments and preliminary inquiries have time limits. The full investigation has no such time limits, but does eventually require review and employs powerful electronic surveillance tools requiring the approval of court warrant. Among other things, it allows for the secret interception of international communications. Like Mr. Rahami, one of the Boston bombers, Tamerlan Tesnarov, was the subject of an assessment in 2011. And just as with Mr. Rahami, the FBI did not generate any additional leads that would have prompted a more serious investigation. The Tasnov assessment was one of approximately 1,000 Joint Terrorism Task Force in Boston carried out that year. In the Orlando nightclub attack this year, the circumstances were different. Mr. Mateen, who carried out deadly assault, had made highly inflammatory comments, which came to the attention of investigators, raising the profile of his case to preliminary inquiry. He told colleagues he had family ties to Al-Qaeda and was a member of Hezbollah. During the 10-month investigation, Mr. Mateen was interviewed twice and the FBI used confidential informers. Still, the Bureau found no evidence that his statements were credible or that he had ties to terrorism. While the federal assessment of Mr. Rahami was closed weeks after it began, he did face criminal charges of aggravated assault and illegal weapons possession stemming from the domestic dispute, according to court records. He spent over 3 months in jail, according to law enforcement official with the knowledge of the investigation. A grand jury, however, declined to indict Mr. Rahami. So there is that information. The next one we have here is off of Reuters, and it says U.S. says some 360,000 refugee spots. Try that again. U.S. says some 360,000 refugee spots pledged at United Nations. A summit hosted by the U.S. President Barack Obama garnered pledges from dozens of countries to resettle or allow the lawful admission of some 360,000 refugees, doubling the number of slots that were available last year, the U.S. envoy to the United Nations said. But Ambassador Samantha Power said that was still only a fraction of what was needed because the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has assessed that some 1.2 million refugees need to be resettled. Attend Obama's summit at the annual UN gathering of world leaders if they made a pledge. Obama told the summit that the refugee crisis was a test of our international system where all nations ought to share in our collective responsibilities because the vast majority of refugees are hosted by just 10 countries. We must recognize that refugees are a symptom of larger failure, be it war, ethnic tensions, or persecution, he said. Obama said the more than 50 countries and international organizations that participated in this summit had collectively increased their contributions to humanitarian groups and UN appeals this year by some $4.5 billion. Power said there were also pledges to increase the number of refugees in school by some 1 million globally. As we've seen in the past, countries have coming to pledging conferences and making commitments and then not delivering, she said. We have to do better on this occasion. The real measure of the summit will only be what countries do and who they help, she said. Obama has rallied businesses to help address the refugee crisis and meet with business leaders just before the summit on Tuesday, who said she had made commitments worth more than $650 million to empower refugees. With a record of 21.3 million refugees globally, the 193-member General Assembly adopted a political declaration on Monday in which they also agreed to spend 2 years negotiating global compacts on refugees and safe, orderly, and regular migration. The next one we have here is off of BizPac Review, and it says, days after attack, Obama throws Americans under the bus in front of the UN. Is President Obama that clueless? In the wake of Islamic terror attacks in 3 states this weekend, the president, speaking at the United Nations, just pitched for admitting more Muslim refugees into the United States. The plan for the president to lead the special UN summit on the need to take in Syrian refugees was apparently already in place before the attacks, the Washington Examiner reported. Of course, the timing could not be worse for Obama, as critics of his immigration policies question whether the U.S. should be tightening immigration laws instead of opening the doors for more refugees. The timing on the summit just reinforces the idea that we need to get a handle on our refugee program, Representative Brian Babin told the Examiner. There is clear and present danger posed to our national security by these poorly vetted refugees that are pouring in, and the president continues to double down on his intentions to bring in more and more of the individuals from hotspots like Syria. In a letter last week signed by 37 House GOP colleagues, the Texas Republican urged Speaker Paul Ryan, Republican of Wisconsin, for provisions to place a moratorium on refugees coming from Syria, the Middle East, and North Africa. The people of the United States and of Western Europe are getting very weary, Babin said, about the politically correct pressure that has been brought to bear by Obama and the UN to take people in who can't be properly vetted. Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton has called for increasing U.S. admission of Syrian refugees to 65,000, the Examiner reported, following the recent attacks and arrests of the alleged terrorists Ahmad Khan Rahami. The UN summit and Clinton's stance were a target for criticism from Donald Trump. The GOP nominee blasted Clinton for supporting immigration policies that allow radical Islamic groups to continue their savage and murder. Adding to Trump's ammunition was a report from the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General that at least 858 immigrants were mistakenly granted U.S. citizenship. If you look at polls, only 35% of Americans want Syrian refugees to come here. I think they instinctively know that these people cannot be vetted. Christian Witten, a former senior State Department advisor in the George W. Bush administration, said. Yet Obama seems to arrogantly push his own agenda, disregarding the voices that oppose him. In these final weeks leading up to the election, it may be a move that plays right into Trump's favor. So there's that information. The next one we have here is off of MSN.com. Violence plagues Chicago, plans to hire nearly 1,000 more cops. Chicago, with the city's homicide rate surging, Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson is expecting to announce on Wednesday plans for city to hire 1,000 more cops. Johnson will detail plans to hire 970 cops over the next 2 years in a speech scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. Anthony Giglimi, I guess it's pronounced, the police department's chief spokesman told USA Today. The announcement comes as Chicago experiencing the most violent year it has seen in decades. The city has already tallied more than 500 homicides in 2016, more than New York and Los Angeles combined, and more than 3,000 non-fatal shootings. The city is on pace to record well over 600 murders for 2016, a threshold it has not reached since 2003. Chicago regularly recorded more than 700 murders a year in the 1990s as gang violence driven by the crack and cocaine epidemic raged. It is unclear how the city plans to pay for the hiring surge that would cost well over $100 million the first year alone. A spokesman for Mayor Rahm Emanuel did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The city has seen a significant increase in every violent crime statistic it tracks. The murders are up 46% from last year. Criminal sexual assaults have risen 18%, and robberies have increased 27%, according to police department data. Johnson has blamed the recent surge in killings on increased gang activity and weak gun laws. The surge in violence also comes amidst growing distrust between Chicago's African American community and police department following the release late last year of disturbing police dash cam video that showed a white police officer fatally shoot a black teen 16 times on a city street. The court-ordered release spurred weeks of protest in Chicago and led to the U.S. Justice Department opening a civil rights investigation of the police department's practices. Some law enforcement officials, including FBI Director James Comey, have suggested that the release of viral videos, including the police video shooting of Laquan McDonald, could be linked to the spike in violence and may be prompting changes in the way officers are policing their cities. Earlier this week, former Chicago Police Superintendent Gary McCarthy, who was fired from his position following the release of McDonald video, suggests that police officers have been put in an untenable situation. The world is upside down right now, McCarthy said in a speech before the City Club of Chicago. The police are not the problem in this country, the criminals are. So there's that article. The next one that we have for you is off of superstation95.com. And it says, now bear with me through this one because I got another one after this. 4 days fuel supply left for New Jersey and New York City after pipeline rupture. Stations being told outage may last a month. Gasoline supplies for New Jersey and New York City are down to 4 days reserve after a massive pipeline ruptured. 5 U.S. states have already declared emergencies because they are running out of gasoline everywhere. Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina are seeing fuel stations closing all over those states because the stations have run out of fuel. Any gas station that actually have fuel left are jam-packed with cars waiting on gas lines. The Colonial Pipeline is massive 36-inch pipe which runs from Houston, Texas to Linden, New Jersey. It supplies gasoline to every state on the East Coast via local refineries. In the New Jersey, New York City area, the pipe feeds the Linden, New Jersey refineries, which supply the entire metro area. Superstation 95 has learned that as of 5 a.m. on Sunday, 18 September, New Jersey and New York City have only 4 days of fuel supply remaining at the refinery storage area, 4 days before gas station here began running out of fuel. The pipeline ruptured on September the 9th and was shut down. Colonial Pipeline Company thought it could be repaired quickly. They were wrong. Gas stations in Tennessee and Alabama are now being told the pipeline will not be repaired until late next week, they hope, and other stations are being told they may not get fuel refills for a month. If such condition strikes us here in the New Jersey, New York City area, it will be catastrophic. Motorists are urged in the strongest possible terms to stop whatever they're doing right now and fuel up their cars, gas tanks immediately. Don't wait. And as news spreads of this outage, anyone who waits may find themselves unable to get any fuel. If stations in the South are being told that they may be out for a month, it is not unreasonable to think a similar warning message may apply to us here in New York City, New Jersey area. The mass media in our area is specifically not reporting this because they do not want people rushing out to get fuel. They seem perfectly content to hope for the best and leave all of you in the dark. Superstation 95 thinks otherwise. This is major news and the public has a right to know. Whether the public acts upon information or finds itself bone dry without fuel is solely up to them. So there is that article. And the next one I have is also on this. It is off of MSN.com. Pipeline will soon reopen, carrying gasoline to 5 states, it says. And this reads, gasoline should begin flowing again on Wednesday through a temporary bypass on a critical pipeline after a major leak in Alabama forced a shutdown that led to surging fuel prices and scattered gas shortages across the South, a company official said on Tuesday. The roughly 500-foot section of pipe serving as the bypass is now complete, but supply distribution may continue for days. But supply disruptions may continue for days. Colonial Pipeline spokesman Steve Baker told the Associated Press, When line 1 restarts, it will take several days for the fuel delivery supply chain to return to normal. As such, some markets served by Colonial Pipeline may experience or continue to experience intermittent service interruptions. Colonial continues to move as much gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel as possible and will continue to do so until markets return to normal, Colonial said in a statement. Here are some details related to the spill that led to long gas lines and empty service stations. What happened? Alabama state workers discovered the leak September the 9th when they noticed strong gasoline odor and sheen on a man-made retention pond, along with dead vegetation, according to a report by Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. The preliminary report does not identify the cause as federal investigation continues. It wasn't initially possible to pinpoint the leak, partly because highly flammable benzene and gasoline vapors prevented firefighters and inspectors from approaching the site for days. The company has acknowledged that since the spill was spotted, between 252,000 gallons and 336,000 gallons of gasoline leaked from its pipeline near Helena, Alabama. That's no more than 37 truckloads at an industry average 9,000 gallons per tank. But because the leak forced a critical pipeline to shut down, its impact was far greater. The pipeline section that failed, built in 1963, runs from Mississippi to Atlanta. Whose pipe is it? Colonial Pipeline Company, based in Alpharetta, Georgia, was formed in the 1960s by oil companies to transport their product along the eastern seaboard. It now operates 5,599 miles of pipelines, transporting more than 100 million gallons daily of gasoline, jet fuel, home heating oil, and other hazardous liquids in 13 states and the District of Columbia, according to company filings. The pipe that failed is one of 2 Colonial lines connecting dozens of refineries in Texas and Louisiana with cities from Alabama to New York. Usually running at full capacity, it provides nearly 40% of the Southeast and East Coast region's gasoline. Are these leaks common? The EPA filed Colonial $34 million in 2003 for gross negligence, at the time largest civil penalty in EPA history, after it spilled almost 1 million gallons of diesel in South Carolina, polluting waterways in 4 states. The company also agreed to spend $30 million to upgrade environmental protection on its pipeline system, but spills happen often in the oil industry. Since 2006, the company has reported 178 spills and other incidents that released a combined 193 gallons of hazardous liquids and caused $39 million in property damage. Most were caused by problems with materials, welding, or some other equipment failure, according to federal accident reports reviewed by the Associated Press. The company paid $381 million in penalties for violating safety rules during the same period. The U.S. Transportation Department last year proposed new inspection requirements for pipelines in rural areas, including increased use of remote leak detection systems. However, the American Petroleum Institute has said retrofitting lines with remote controlled valves could cost up to $1.5 million per device. What did it do to gas prices? The spill reduced fuel supplies in at least 5 states, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas, despite executive orders by governors across the South to suspend limits on trucking hours, allowing drivers to stay on the road longer to bring fuel to gas stations. The American Automobile Association reports that in Georgia, the regular gas price rose about 5 cents from Monday to Tuesday to an average of $2.36 statewide. That's up nearly 27 cents over the past week. The price climbed nearly 7 cents since Monday. In more rural areas of Georgia, South Carolina's regular gas rose nearly 4 cents from Monday to Tuesday and nearly 18 cents from a week ago. The Columbia, South Carolina area saw prices rise about 6 cents since Monday. AAA reports Tuesday that Alabama, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia also saw prices climb since Monday. What's the environmental impact? The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency said in a statement Tuesday that sampling teams are working collaboratively with Alabama Department of Environmental Management, the Cahaba Riverkeep, the Colonial Pipeline Company, to collect water quality samples throughout impacted and potentially impacted areas at the response site. The the EPA said its water samples are consistent with Colonial Pipeline Company water samples. Current sampling results indicate that Peel Creek and Cahaba River are currently not impacted, the statement said. The agency said it will continue to monitor water quality in Peel Creek and the Cahaba River. The spill sent thousands of gallons of gasoline pouring into a retention pond at the site of an old mine, but no fuel made it into the nearby Cahaba River, in part because of locally dry weather. We averted a disaster this time, said David Butler, an environmentalist with Cahaba River Keeper, who has been monitoring the spill response at the site. So there is that information. So gas should be trickling into those 5 states shortly. The next one we have here is off the Washington Free Beacon. Obama administration laundered U.S. cash to Iran via New York Fed and Euro banks. Congressman says administration laundered this money in order to circumvent U.S. law. A member of the House Intelligence Committee is accusing the Obama administration of laundering some $1.7 billion in U.S. taxpayer dollars to Iran through a complicated network that included the New York Federal Reserve and several European banks, according to conversations with sources and new information obtained by the lawmaker and viewed by Washington Free Beacon. New disclosures made by the Treasury Department to Rep. Mike Pompeo, Republican of Kansas, a House Intelligence Committee member, show that an initial $400 million cash payment to Iran was wired to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and then converted from U.S. dollars to Swiss francs and moved to an account at the Swiss National Bank, according to a copy of communication obtained exclusively by the Free Beacon. Once the money was transferred to the Swiss bank, the Federal Reserve Bank withdrew the funds from its account as Swiss franc banknotes, and the U.S. government physically transported them to Geneva before personally overseeing the handover to an agent of Iran's central bank, according to the documents. These disclosures shine new light on how the Obama administration moved millions of dollars from U.S. accounts to European banks in order to facilitate 3 separate cash payments to Iran totaling $1.7 billion. The latest information is adding fuel to accusations the Obama administration arranged the payment in this fashion to skirt U.S. sanction laws and give Iran the money for release of U.S. hostages in what many have called ransom. Congress has been investigating the circumstances surrounding a payment for months and said the administration is blocking certain requests for more detailed information about the cash transaction with Iran. By withholding critical details and stonewalling Congress inquiries, President Obama seems to be hiding whether or not he and others broke U.S. law by sending $1.7 billion in cash to Iran. Pompeo told the Free Beacon, but Americans can plainly see that the Obama administration launders this money in order to circumvent U.S. law and appease the Islamic Republic of Iran. As new details emerge, congressional critics such as Pompeo and Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, are beginning to suspect the U.S. government laundered the money in order to provide Tehran with immediate access. Think about this timeline. The U.S. withdraws $400 million in cash from the Swiss National Bank, then physically transports it to another city to hand off to Iranian officials 3 days before Iran releases 4 American hostages, Pompeo said. But it gets worse. Less than a week after this, the U.S. again sends hordes of cash to Iran. As we speak, Iran is still holding 3 more American hostages, and I fear what precedent this administration has set. The initial $400 million payment to Iran was initiated on January the 14th, 2016, according to information sent by Treasury Department Pompeo. For the first settlement payment in January, the Treasury assisted the Defense, Finance, and Accounting Services, DFAS, in crafting a wire instruction to transfer the $400 million in principal from the Iran Foreign Military Sales Program account on January the 14th, 2016, the document states. Treasury worked with DFAS and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which was acting as Treasury's financial agent, so that the funds were converted from dollars to Swiss francs and then credited to a Federal Reserve Bank account at the Swiss National Bank, which is the central bank of Switzerland. It adds, the U.S. hostages were released shortly after Iran received its initial cash payment. The additional 1.3 billion cash payment was facilitated by the Dutch Central Bank, which helped the United States transfer the money to an account before it was converted into euros. Dutch Bank then dispersed the funds as euro banknotes in the Netherlands to an official from the Central Bank of Iran. The payment was broken down into two separate transactions that occurred on January 22nd and February 5th. The senior administration officials maintain that the transaction was completely legal and not paid out as part of the ransom to Iran. These officials have said that cash was the most reliable method to ensure Iran received immediate access to the funds, as its banking system is still under sanction. Treasury and Justice Department would not respond to the Free Beacon request for comment about the exact type of legal approval given prior to the cash payment. One congressional advisor who works closely on the Iran issue told the Free Beacon that Obama administration appears to have involved multiple branches of the government in order to help conceal the cash payment to Iran. It looks as if the White House made just about every corner of the executive branch complicit in covering up the extent of its payment to Iran, the source said. Congress was already aggressively looking into payments involving state treasury and energy departments. Now it's Justice Department too. We already know that the top officials from Justice objected strongly to ransom deal, but were overruled. Congress wants to know what happened and why. A senior congressional aide familiar with investigations regarding the matter told the Free Beacon that the administration continues to hide information from lawmakers about the cash payment. The American public and members of Congress understand psychology. If the administration is hiding something, there is a reason. President Obama, Secretary Kerry, and others would like to pretend that their months of evasiveness and stonewalling regarding Iran are normal, but their behavior indicates otherwise, the source said. Refusing to answer basic questions about millions of U.S. taxpayer dollars paid to the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism only invites more questions. So there you have that article. And the next one that we have here is about Joe Biden. I don't know how you feel about this, but I think this article is good news. So we'll see what you think. This is off of statnews.com. In an interview, Biden outlines a lifelong role in cancer research, but not in a Clinton White House. Houston reports, Vice President Joe Biden says he plans to dedicate his career after politics to cancer research and to do so for as long as I'm alive, but ruled out serving in Hillary Clinton's administration should she win in the White House this fall. In a wide-ranging interview with STAT, Biden said he would want to work closely with Clinton administration to build on the cancer moonshot he launched earlier this year and to help coordinate the initiative. But he dismissed the possibility that Clinton's recent appeal for him to continue working on the effort meant he would serve in government. I'm not going to stay on in the administration, Biden said in a 25-minute interview here at Rice University where he delivered a speech Friday. What Hillary talked about is, as I understood it, me being able to have the same authority over elements of her administration from the outside that I have now from the inside to be able to coordinate those efforts. Biden said he's still exploring ways in which to help accelerate cancer research once he and President Obama leave office. His commitment is born out of his personal loss. His son, Bo, died of brain cancer last year. He said he has discussed his next steps with scientists, foundations, and other institutions, and he recalled a recent conversation with billionaire philanthropist whom his aides declined to identify about how he might work with existing philanthropic efforts relating to cancer. Has spoken with Napster founder, Sean Parker, and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, among others, about the moonshot. I'm going to stay involved in this effort as long as I'm alive, Biden said, so I'm going to stay engaged. Exactly how, I don't know yet. Should Donald Trump win the White House, Biden said he hoped it wouldn't spell the end of his initiative. He pointed to Republican support in Congress as reason to be optimistic. I would hope Trump would bring a tract out of just pure patriotic necessity, some very good minds, to let him know that there is a lot of money we're spending in the federal government, billions of dollars on medical research, Biden said, and there is a consensus. He contrasted supportive Republicans with arch conservative Freedom Caucus, which is frequently skeptical of federal spending. He said he hoped Trump would not fall in the latter camp. I don't think he's that crazy, Biden said. We can afford all this. The Obama administration has requested $755 million to fund cancer research initiative in the next fiscal year, with significant money going to the National Institute of Health and other U.S. agencies. It set a goal of achieving in 10 years worth of progress in cancer research over the next 5 years. Biden said he's hopeful that the GOP-controlled Congress will approve additional funding for the moonshot this year. The vice president has convened numerous high-level meetings among cancer experts and sought to encourage collaboration among researchers. The initiative has started to produce specific policy changes, such as new rules for clinical trials announced last week. But Biden's efforts have not been immune to both skepticism and outright criticism. In January, the editor-in-chief of New England Journal of Medicine, along with the deputy, published an editorial labeling as parasites scientists who try to use one another's research data to advance their own work. The editorial, which did not mention Biden directly but followed his plea for data sharing as part of the moonshot, provoked a sharp backlash. 4 days later, editor-in-chief Jeffrey Drazen issued a letter clarifying his position and saying that researchers who use others' data can substantially improve human health. He got the living crap kicked out of him. I didn't say a word. I never met the guy, Biden said. It was all some mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I'm sorry, I'm hardly sorry. The interview, Biden also responded to concerns that he and his aides initially overlooked the importance of prevention efforts in the battle against cancer. While public health crusades like anti-smoking and anti-obesity campaigns are important to preventing cancer, he said his initiative was focused on improving research to better understand genetic factors that predispose people to disease so that they can seek treatment earlier. There are still going to be people who are going to get cancer, he said, that have nothing to do with the fact that they've ever smoked or been exposed to smoking, that have nothing to do with environmental impacts. Asked whether he has seen moonshot change the culture of medical science, Biden said researchers have agreed to collaborate in ways he didn't expect. But he described in frank terms the problem he was trying to solve, the cancer politics that he often refers to in his speeches. An awful lot of guys and women I met short of walk by the mirror and go Nobel Prize, Biden said. You don't usually win Nobel Prize in their minds by sharing. Major research institutions and drug companies have committed to sharing some of their work as part of the moonshot. As he has previously, Biden credited the progress not to his own ability to accelerate research. There's nothing indispensable about me, he said, but to an ability to gather people up and help break down barriers. I'm not saying all of a sudden there's this selflessness that occurred, Biden told Stat, but the medical culture, I think, was a little embarrassed, at least in my view, because I don't think they realized how different their culture was than other sciences. There's a lot of pushback now on me, he said. Maybe it's because they think I'm going to go away. Maybe they think this is just a phase of the moon. I don't know, but I don't think so. I've just got a feeling, unquote. So there's that information. Well, in my opinion, he's made a pitiful vice president. Perhaps he can do some good cancer research. Maybe that's his field. It's good to know that if Clinton was to get in office, he would not plan to stay. The next one we have, this is your feel good, and I've got to get it loaded up here because this is going to be a screen share once I get it so that it'll play. Now we'll get up here and we'll screen share this one because I think you'll really enjoy this. And let's go.
So, I'm here with Brenda, and so me and Brenda today are going to be going around SMU, and we're just going to see how many people we can just like make their day. Basically, the idea is just to see what impact it can have if we just choose to serve others and just love on others throughout our day. So, you ready to do it? You ready, Rhea? Should we be nice to people?
Because I love people.
If we're nice to someone,
I don't know.
you want to find out? What? Great, how does it feel to give to others?
You make my day.
Yeah, I had a blast doing random acts of kindness, and now we want to challenge you to do the same. What do you think, Greta?
Yeah!
So, this week, pick 3 people every day and do your best to serve them in any way you can.
Okay, there you go. That is an inspirational story that I thought you would all enjoy and get a kick out of. And if that don't put a smile on your face, there's something wrong with you. Sweet little girl doing random acts of kindness and being nice to people, making them smile. It may not be anything but a little bag of chips or some candy or a fountain drink, but it puts a smile on people's face, even a flower. So do your random acts of kindness and make somebody smile. And with that, we're going to shut her down for today, but we'll be back here in about 55 minutes with Barry. So I want you all to join me. Go off and get you a sandwich real quick or something and a soft drink and come on back. And we'll be here with Barry in a little bit. Bye.